Hello everyone, welcome to this session on what is Azure Cloud. Today in this session, I will take you through what is Azure Cloud and why exactly it is required in the industry out there. So let's go ahead and start off with the agenda. So we'll start with what is Azure and then move on to discuss a story of a startup through which I'll explain you why the need of cloud basically came, right? Then we move on and talk about some of the companies who are using Azure, like in the story that we will be discussing, right? After that, we'll move on and talk about what are the various services in Azure and what are the pricing of it. After that, we'll move on and I'll show you guys how you can launch a server on Azure, your first server on Azure, given the fact that you do not know about Azure anything as of now. Finally, I'll show you guys how you can get started if you want to make a career in the Azure cloud. Right, so guys, this is the agenda for this session. I hope it's clear to you. Now let's move on and start off with the first topic where I tell you a definition of what is Azure basically. So guys, Azure is basically a cloud provider which basically gives you a lot of servers which you can work on, but these servers are not owned by you. You don't have to buy these servers. You can just rent them on a per minute or a per hour basis. Okay, so this is what Azure Cloud is. Now you will think, how is that helpful? Everything will be clear. Just hang on with me, just stay with me as we move along in this session. Okay, so for now, all you have to understand is that Azure is basically a cloud platform. And by that, what I mean is it's a platform which basically gives you servers on rent, which you can use on a per hourly basis. Okay, all right. Now, what are some features of Azure? Okay, so let's come on these features later. I'll discuss each one of these. Let's move on and talk about the story that we were discussing. So let's talk about the story of a startup which basically wants to deploy its application and want or let's say I am a food company like let's say Zomato or Uber Eats, and I want to deploy my app onto the internet and I want to make it available to the world. So what is the journey for that app? How do I make it available to the world? So let's say we are Uber Eats, and what we want to do is we want our application to be available on the internet so that people can start using it. So how do I start? What do I do? So the first thing that I do is I know that for making this application available on the internet, I will have to buy some servers on which I can deploy this application. Okay. Now, since this is a new application that I've developed, I am not that much confident that I will be, having a user base of around 1 million people overnight. So what I do is I start small. I buy around 2 or 3 stacks of servers, which can serve up to 300 to 400 people, and accordingly I deploy my application on it, and it's good to go. It's now available on the internet. But before buying these servers, let's say I spent an X amount. Okay, so before even starting to get anything back from my business, I've invested on infrastructure, I've invested on servers, and servers are not cheap, guys, right? So if you want to start a business, before the cloud time, what you had to do was you had to spend a lot of money on buying servers, and once you had these servers, you used to make your application available. Now you would say, well, this is just a one time investment. Somebody can take a loan and then they can probably take these servers, right? So what's the big deal in that? So let's go ahead and see how the story progresses. So now what happens is that your app basically becomes hit overnight. And now what happens is you basically have around 10,000 or even 1 million users who are now wanting to download your application, right? And want to use your application for its services. Now what do you do? Right? So you are a startup. Let's say you had, an investment of 15 lakhs that you made in the server, and you took that 15 lakhs, let's say, on loan, right? And you were expecting that slowly and gradually, as your app will proceed, you will basically get more money and you will buy servers from that money. But now what has happened is your application has become a hit overnight. Okay, now your application, people are loving your application, but still they are not able to use it. Why? Because your servers are overloaded and the app is crashing all the time. So how do you fix that? So for fixing that, what you have to do is you have to buy more servers. And how do you get these servers on such a short notice, right? So what you do is you basically take help of a cloud platform. Now, before the cloud era, this was not at all possible. Okay, you could not rent servers, but now with the availability of cloud providers, this has become possible. So if you want 2000 servers right now, you can go to Azure cloud, you can deploy 2000 servers, and you will have those 2000 servers with you, right? And all you have to do is just pay the rent to them on a per hour basis, which will be charged to you monthly. So if you use servers for, let's say, this month, so after the end of the month you have to pay them the rent based on the number of hours you use their servers for. Okay, now this is a very profitable model. Reason being, let's say your servers are running for this month, the next month you obviously will generate some revenue, and from that revenue you can pay out the rent of the servers that you have basically used, right? And when you talk about the pricing of these servers rent, it's actually pretty low. Why is it low? Why? Because let's imagine you had your own servers, right? So if some fault occurs in your server, what would you want to do? You would have to hire a team which can around the clock monitor your hardware for any faults, and if any fault occurs, they have to basically replace that hardware as well. So that would again incur cost of the replacement, and at the same time, for maintaining that maintenance team, you again will have to invest more money. But when you're using a cloud provider like Azure or any other cloud provider for that matter, they don't charge you for anything. They just charge you for the rent that they're taking from you. They will have their own maintenance team. They will basically take care of all the hardware faults which are there, and you don't just have to worry about making your business expand. You just have to focus on your application. You don't have to worry about what infrastructure is doing, how is my infrastructure performing. Everything will be managed by the company from which you have taken the servers from, right? And that is exactly what a cloud platform is, and that is exactly what Azure is. So Azure is basically a service which rents servers, right? And this is provided to us by Microsoft. So apart from Azure, there are a lot of other services as well. For example, you have AWS, you have Google Cloud Platform, and all of them, they basically operate on the same principle that they give servers on rent. Okay, so this is a gist about what Azure Cloud is and how it basically works, right? Now let's talk about, go back and let's talk about the features of Azure, right? So Azure was basically founded in the year 2010, right? It is widely recognized. It is used by 90% of Fortune 500 companies. So with that, you get to know how popular this business model has become, how convenient it has become for companies, that 90% of the Fortune 500 companies are basically using this service for their day-to-day needs, right? So the next point is, it is very cost effective. Like I said, you don't have to buy any hardware, you don't have to maintain a team. The whole hardware that you have, right, that is taken care of by Azure, and all you have to do is just pay the rent monthly. Okay. When we talk about language support, that we understand, if I'm a cloud provider, I understand that you as developers, you probably can develop on any programming language. That's why, to attract more customers, what I've done is I support all the languages on my cloud platform, right? And most of the cloud languages, most of the programming languages which are there, which are, for example, Python, for example, Golang, you name it, Azure Cloud Platform will have it. Now, in case they do not have it, what you can also do is, since it's just a server, you can also install anything that you want on it, right? But what Azure also gives you is, it also gives you servers of different kind, right? It can give you a server which has everything pre-installed in it. So if you want a pre-installed server, in that it can give you all the popular language support. But let's say that you are using a language which is very new, so in that case, you can just rent a server and install that language over the system. That is also possible, right? And then let's talk about availability zones. So availability zones, don't stress yourself with the word availability zones. It's very simple. It just basically means that where all in the world I have my data centers, right? So I have my data centers in 54 regions across the world, and that basically means, let's say tomorrow there is a world war which happens, and because of that, the US country itself is wiped off. Don't quote me on that. I'm just giving you an example. So if it is wiped off, even in that case, your data centers or your application will still be up if you deploy your application at multiple places. Let's say you deploy some servers in Europe, you deploy some servers in US, then some in India, then some in other countries. So if that happens, right? So even if there is a natural calamity, even if there's a war kind of a scenario, your application will always be up. Now, sometimes it also happens is that, let's say, your US region has a power fault, right? And the data center itself is not working. So still you have so many data centers to serve your application from. So this is why people prefer, a cloud platform where they get this kind of a flexibility, which probably they would have taken years, to afford, given that their application would have been a hit. Okay, so like I said, it is available worldwide. It is available in 54 regions. And also, let me talk about this scenario again where we were talking about a startup. Now, let's say your app. Let's say a guy who invented Uber Eats. He did not know, or who invented Zomato. He did not know that their application will become such a hit, right? I mean, everybody wants their application to become a hit, but there's always an uncertainty when you're starting a business, right? So with that uncertainty also comes in the fact that you how much should you invest so that later it doesn't cause you a problem. So when you have a cloud platform that you can basically go for your infrastructure needs, anybody can now start a business, right? From as low as an investment of 10,000 rupees, you can basically go ahead, rent servers for a month, and you just have to pay 10,000 rupees, and you can see whether your business is working or not. So that's the power which cloud platforms has given us as consumers, that if you have an idea, you can ideate that idea into an app and leave it to the cloud providers to deploy it. So if it doesn't work, you are just short of 10,000 rupees as the month end. That's it, right? But if you had to start a business and think of a time when cloud was not there, think of the kind of investment that you had to do, right? So that's why cloud model is so popular, and that's why we're discussing cloud today as well. Okay, so now let's talk about what happens when you take Azure. So what are the things which basically get managed for you? Okay, so now when you migrate to Azure, when more people are coming to your application, you can basically add more servers. Now, you would not shy away from adding more servers, given so much of users want to use your application. It's a win-win situation, right? And with Azure, like I said, it gives you on-demand usage of any number of servers that you want, right? If you want, if the traffic decreases on your app, you can also scale down your infrastructure, right? Let's say today is Friday night, and because of that, a lot of people are basically ordering food online. So you get a traffic surge, and because of that, you need more servers. But let's say on a Monday, a lot of people will not order. So what you can do in that case is you can always scale down your infrastructure as well, right? And you will only be charged for the amount of time you use the servers, use the extra servers for. Let's say you use it for 2 days, you will only be charged for 2 days. So the pricing is also very transparent. Okay, moving forward now, the availability as well is also great, because I said Azure data centers are available in so many regions of the world, right? And that's why the app availability is also great. So now that you're convinced that Azure is such a good thing to basically start off with, now let's talk about from an employability perspective. Let's say you're not a guy who wants to start a startup, right? You're a guy who basically are thinking about their career. So how should you go ahead and think whether you want to learn Azure, or whether you want to learn AWS, or you want to learn Google Cloud Platform? So in that case, these are all the companies which are using Azure currently, right? Microsoft, of course, is using Azure for all its infrastructure needs. BMW, LinkedIn, Samsung, Honeywell, Lufthansa, all these are big companies who are using Azure right now. So if you learn Azure in the future, and let's say you want to switch your job, these are all the kind of companies that you can apply to, right? And of course, these are not the only company, but there are a lot of companies that you can apply to. But these are some of the popular names that you can apply to once you have learned Azure. Okay. Now let's talk about, let's get down into the technical nitty gritties, and let me talk about more Azure from a technical perspective. What is renting servers exactly? What are we basically getting on our plate when I reach on the Azure platform? Let's talk about that. So, guys, these are some of the services that are offered to you when you basically sign up for Azure. So, the servers that I was talking about, those servers are basically called virtual machines. Okay, so you get any number of virtual machines that you want once you have signed up for Azure, and you are basically charged for only the time you use these machines for. And virtual machines are nothing but it's as good to say that it's basically your own personal computer, but that personal computer is not with you. It's basically in some remote location. And what you do is you basically connect to it using terminals, using RDP protocols, right? So you can remote desktop into your server, or you can SSH into your server, and you can use it. It's just that that server is existing somewhere in the Azure data center. Now, once you have access to that machine, you can do anything that you want with that machine. Let's say you get a brand new laptop, right? Now, on that brand new laptop, let's say you want to use it for gaming. So, what you do is you install all the gaming softwares, you install all the games, and then you start to play that game, right? Similarly, let's say if you're talking about deploying servers, let's say if I have a PHP application, so all I have to do is install PHP in it, and then put my code on it, and then deploy the application. That's it. If my application is a Node.js application, to install Node on it, put my code on it, starts to run. Right? So that's what a virtual machine is. It's like a personal computer, you can do anything with it. Then comes something called as app service. Now, app service is also a virtual machine, but it's an automated version of virtual machine, right? So what it means is, let's say you want a Python server. Okay, so if you want a Python server, if you take a virtual machine, what you will have to do, you'll have to install all the softwares on it and then put your code on it and then start to work. But with app services, what Microsoft does for you is it makes your life easier. What it does is it automatically gives you a server which has everything installed. All you have to do is just upload your code over there and your application will be deployed. So when this kind of an automation comes in to make your life easier, and if you want to use this kind of an automation in Azure, you can basically use app services. They are basically virtual machines only, but they have an automation script attached to it, which can basically install all the softwares that you want, right? Similarly, when you talk about blob storage is basically a service given to us by Azure, which basically caters to your storage needs. Okay, so I gave you the example of having our application which we want to deploy on the internet. Let's say our application is deployed on the internet, it is working fine, and let's say our application is something like Snapchat, or it's something like Instagram, where a lot of people upload a lot of photos every day, right? And let's say every day you're getting some 4 or 5 terabytes of data on your app. So how do you store this much amount of data? And let's say some surge happens someday, right? And people now, let's say, for example, right now we are going through the COVID-19 phase. Now, what is happening is everyone is at home and everybody is heavily using their social media app. So what they're doing is they're daily uploading photos, they're daily uploading statuses, they're daily doing lives. Now, with that, what happens is the capacity also is required, right? So what happens with blob storage is this storage you can attach to your virtual machine or your app, and this is an unlimited storage. So it basically is charged, the pricing model for the storage works something like this, that you are only be charged for the amount of storage that you use. Let's say you use 2 terabytes in month one while you have launched your application, you will only be charged for 2 terabytes. Next month, let's say your usage is now 4 terabytes, so now you will be charged for 4 terabytes. So that's how the blob storage is, and there is no uh, size restriction on it. You can put as much data as you want without worrying about the storage running out. So that's what the blob service is. It's again an unlimited service that you can use without worrying about the hardware specifications of how this basically is going to work, right? Then you have something called as file storage. So file storage is nothing but deploying your application, uh, or deploying. So basically, let's say you use a network drive in your office, right? Or you would have also seen that if you want to set up a home network, what you do is you share your drive from your computer, and then somebody from the other computer, if they go to the IP address of your computer, they can access your hard drive. So if you want a thing like that, but on the internet, you can use the file storage service. So what this does is it deploys a hard drive on the cloud, and then that hard drive can be mounted on any system regardless of what operating system is being used. It could be a Mac operating system, it could be a Windows operating system, it could be a Linux operating system. Any operating system that you want, you can map a network drive to it, and that network drive will then be shared with all these computers on the go, right? So let's say somebody from the Mac OS, they put the file over there. The guy on the Windows system will be able to see that file and will be able to use it. So that's what file storage is, and this is basically helpful to us when you have a distributed kind of an architecture and you want one central place for all your things to be stored. Okay, similarly you have something called as virtual networks. So you would have seen routers or switches in your offices which are basically fitted in the server room, right? Now let's say you have a fleet of 200 300 servers on the Azure cloud, and you also want them to be able to interact with each other. So all that is possible by deploying a network on cloud itself without the need of buying routers, without the need of buying switches, anything like that. You can just create virtual network and deploy your applications in it, right? As you want, right? You don't have to worry about, whether there will be any capacity problem or not. Everything is managed with the help of virtual networks, and virtual networks is basically a default service. So you are not charged for any of the network needs that you want. You will only be charged for probably the internet connection that your app will be using. But other than that, all the network needs, all the kind of configurations that you do in your network, nothing is charged extra by your cloud provider. Okay, then there is something called as load balancers. So load balancers are again a service which basically helps you to deal with multiple servers. So let's say your application is deployed on 5 servers, right? And let's say as a user I want to use your application, so I will go to ubereats.com or I will go to zomato.com. I will not think about how many servers you have deployed in your infrastructure and which server should I connect to, right? As a user, I'll just go to the domain. But in the backend, what happens is the load balancer, it distributes whatever traffic is coming onto a URL automatically between all the servers that you have deployed. So that's what a load balancer is, right? So these were some of the popular services which you have in Azure. And now let's talk about how to get started in Azure and what do you get when you sign up on Azure, given the fact that you're hearing about Azure today, right? Let's say you do not know anything about Azure, you're starting today, and what are the things that you will get with Azure? So as a welcome package, what Azure gives you is the first time that you sign up on Azure, you get 13,000 worth rupees of credit. Okay, you can use this credit to experiment anything on Azure for the first 30 days, and you can basically realize what is the potential, what are the kind of things that you can do in Azure with this 13,000 credit, right? So let's say we were talking about creating a startup. So the first month of your startup is absolutely free with this credit. Okay, then some of the free services that also Azure happens to give us. So some services are free for a lifetime, some services are free for the first 12 months. So all that details you can see on the screen, you can have a look at it. And now let's talk about how we can basically deploy a server. So I've been talking from the starting of the session about renting a server, but what exactly is renting a server? Let's see that by doing a hands-on. So let me just log on to my browser, and let me basically go to portal.azure.com. Okay, so this is my Azure dashboard, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to log in. So let me put in my email address for the Azure portal that I'm going to use. And now let me put the password. So once you've signed up on Azure, this is the screen that you're going to see. This is basically how your Azure dashboard is going to look like. Now let's see how we can rent a server from Azure from over here. So first thing first, what you'll have to do is you'll have to click on virtual machines. Okay, then click on add. And once you've clicked on add, the next thing that you have to do is basically go ahead and deploy a server. Okay, so let's first create a resource group. Let's call it demo. And now let's create a virtual machine. Let's say we call it Azure VM. Okay, and let's say I want to deploy it in a region. Let's say I want to deploy it in West US. All right, now what is the operating system that I want to install on this server? So let's say I want to install Windows. So what I'll do is, or let's say we want to install Linux, so let's select Ubuntu, right? And now we will select the size of the server that we need. So if you want a 2-core CPU and 8 GB RAM, you will be charged 5,000 rupees a month. Okay, so let's say I go with this, and don't worry, you will, if you launch the server, it's not like you will be charged 5,000 immediately. If I delete it after, let's say, 20 minutes, I will only be charged for 20 minutes. That's it. Okay, so now once you have selected the size of machine that you want, now let's go ahead and specify the username. So let's say the username I want to give is Intellipaat. So let me just type in that. And what I want to do is I want to connect using a password. So let me enter a password over here. Okay, and now what I can do is I can basically allow some ports uh, which will be used to connect to it. So let's allow the HTTP port and also the SSH port. Okay, so what are these ports? It'll be clear to you in a while. Now let's go ahead and click on review plus create. Okay, so it says required information is missing. So over here in management, it requires a storage account. So we can just switch off diagnostics and then it should be good to go. So here you get the actual pricing, guys. So this pricing is 7 rupees per hour. Okay, so if I use this server for 1 hour, I'll be charged for 7.7 rupees, right? So that's very cheap, given the fact that we are using someone else's infrastructure, we are using somebody else's internet, we're using somebody else's electricity for running that server, etc. So now let's click on create, and that's it. Now you basically have started to deploy a server which is now being rented from the Azure infrastructure. Okay, so how do you go and connect to this server? So first of all, it needs to get deployed. So it will take around a minute or a two to get deployed. And once it is deployed, then you can use a tool, a simple tool, an SSH tool like Putty to connect to it. Okay, so what is this tool called Putty? Let me quickly show you. So let me see if I have it on my system. I do. So what you have to do is, once you have started your VM, just go to your browser, type in download Putty. Okay, the first link that you see, just click over there, and here you will see a link like this, download Putty. Click here, and on this screen what you'll have to do is you will have to install a version which is matching to your Windows operating system. If it's a 32-bit operating system, install this version. If it's a 64-bit operating system, install this version. So in my case, it's already installed, so I'm going to use that. If you're on a Linux operating system, or let's say if you're on a Mac, in that case you can use your terminal itself to connect. You don't need a separate SSH tool to connect. Okay, so I have Putty, so let me show you how it looks. So this is the tool. All you have to do is you have to put the IP address over here, right, and then click on open. So then in that case what it'll do is it'll ask you for the password. Once you enter the password, you will be able to connect to your machine. So what we're going to do is, let me deploy a server, and then what I'll do is I'll deploy a website on it. And I'll show you guys, you can also access that website if you go to that IP address. Okay, so let's wait for the machine to get deployed. So it's still in the deployment phase, deployment in progress. So if you want to see if your virtual machine is ready or not, what you can do is just go to this virtual machine section. And here, once your machine is ready, it will be listed. So let's do a quick refresh over here. So right now it has not been listed, which means it's still in deployment. As you can see in the notification also, it says deployment in progress. And once it's deployed, it'll get listed over here. And at the same time, you can just choose an IP address of that machine, put that IP address over here in this putty tool, click on open, and then you will be able to access that machine. Okay, so let's wait for a while it's getting deployed. So let me read out some questions that I have on the live chat. So let's say I have a question from Ajay, and he's saying, is blob storage similar to RDBMS? So no, Ajay. So RDBMS is basically a database where you can store textual data, right? But blob storage is a place where you can store binary files. Like for example, you can store text files, you can store video files, you can store images. So that is what a blob storage is. So I hope that answers your question. Then let me see if somebody else also has question. So Ace Xander says, is AWS better than Azure? So not really, Ace Xander. Whatever services AWS is giving, Azure also is giving the same services. But let me tell you a fact that right now the market for AWS is actually saturated. A lot of people know AWS these days, and the reason for that is AWS was launched way back in 2006. Okay, and because of that, what has happened is a lot of people already know AWS because it is so popular. Right now, when you talk about which service is more popular, obviously AWS is more popular since it has been around for the longest of the time. But when you talk about employability, a lot of people already know AWS, so hence there is a lot of competition when you apply for a job. Okay, but when you talk about Microsoft Azure, since it's a new service which was basically launched in 2010, right? So because of that, a lot of engineers know Azure as of now, but a lot of companies have already shifted to Azure because of the pricing model that Azure gives. So Azure has a better pricing model than AWS, and that's why companies are preferring Azure also, right? Second scene is that no company would like to basically depend on only one cloud provider. So let's say if I have all my servers on AWS, I will not just rely on AWS. Let's say the whole AWS service tomorrow it goes down. Okay, so what I do is, as a company, as a contingency plan, I also prefer other cloud providers, and that's where I deploy my servers as well. So that would be the answer to your questions. So Naresh is saying, can you give us some insights on the savings between buying servers versus moving to cloud for a moderate application? So let's take this example only, Naresh. So if you buy an 8 GB machine with two core CPU, it will cost you around 15 to 20,000 rupees, right? Now in that machine, you will not get the monitor, you will not get the keyboard. Obviously, you will have to buy it separately. You do not have the option of upgrading your machine. Let's say tomorrow you want an 8 core CPU. So in that case, what will you do with your 2 core CPU? But with cloud, that is not the case. With cloud, what you can do is, if today I have launched this virtual machine, which has basically two cores of CPU, tomorrow I can just, take the snapshot of this virtual machine and I can launch that snapshot in a bigger machine. Right? So when I say a bigger machine, and an 8 core CPU or a 16 core CPU, and I can then just stop or terminate my 2 core CPU machine. So in that case, I don't have to rely on any infrastructure, right? I don't have any foundation that now that I have owned this machine, I have to use it. It's nothing like that. I can leave it anytime I want and I can shift to a newer hardware version. Second of all, obviously, since it's a machine, it will break down someday, right? So you don't have to incur the maintenance cost as well. So when you talk about long term, being on cloud is actually cheaper than actually maintaining your own infrastructure, since even for that 2 GB machine, you will have to have some sort of a admin guy who's going to take care of all the necessary security patches, whether all the security guidelines are followed or not on your application. But that is not the case when you have to deal with Azure. Azure basically promises you all the world-class facilities for the infrastructure that you have deployed, and at the same time they have their own team which manages their server. So you never get to even know whether some hardware fault was there or anything like what that was there, because Azure manages everything on their own. Okay, so now that our machine is now deployed, guys, what I can do is, this is the IP address of my machine. Let me just copy it, and what I can do is, let me just open the software and put the IP address over here. Okay, now let's click on open. So what I'll do is, my software will now connect to the server, and now it is asking me what is the username that is associated with this server. So let me just make the font a little bigger so it's more clearer to you. All right, better. So now what I can do is I can enter the username over here, and now it is asking me for the password. So let me enter the password as well and hit enter. Okay, I don't want to reset the password now. Oh, 1 second, guys. Okay, let me just try one more time. Let me just try to connect to it again. I think with all the talking, I forgot the password to this machine. Let me try again. Okay, so I think the username was wrong. The username was Intellipaat, and the password was this. Yes, so my username was wrong. Okay, so now I've successfully connected to my Linux machine, and now I can do anything with this machine, right? Let me just update this machine first. So the machine is getting updated, and then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to deploy a web server on it. So let me deploy an Apache software on this machine. So the Apache software is now getting installed, and once it is installed, what we simply have to do now is just type in the IP address of this server on our system, right? And then we will be able to see the website which is deployed over here. So while this is being deployed, let me go to my dashboard and let me copy the IP address from here. Okay, now let me paste the IP address here, hit enter, and as you can see, this is a website which is being hosted on this IP address. So right now, if you go to this IP address, you will be able to see this website. Let me do a very cool thing. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll change the website. So let me go to the path where the website exists, and let me remove the default website from there, and let me add my own website. So let's say I type in a very simple HTML code, which is basically going to say hello world from Intellipaat. Right, let's save it. And now let's go back to the browser, refresh, and here you go. This is our custom website which is now available on this IP address. So you can go ahead, type in this IP address on your machine, and you would be able to see this website which I've just deployed on my rented server from Microsoft Azure. So guys, this is the power of cloud. On the fly, you get a server and I'm just being charged 7 rupees for it in an hour, right? So if I delete it after an hour, let's say I'll just be charged 7 rupees from my credit card next month. Okay, so I'll just leave the server on so you guys can see, whoever is watching this video. Now let's go on and talk about how to get started. How do you go ahead and start learning Azure? So, guys, obviously, the two things that are freely available to you are our YouTube tutorials. You can go through them, learn about Azure from there, and we also have a lot of content over our blog. So, if you go to intellipaat.com/blog, you will be able to see a lot of content on Azure that we have already written. So, that can give you more information, more knowledge, uh, more practice sessions on what you can do with the Azure portal. But we also understand that you might be looking for a professional training, right? So we also have a course on Azure which you can actually buy from us, and this course will actually be taught to you by industry experts. This will be taught to you by seasoned Azure architects or administrators who are working in the industry right now, and they will be teaching you this course and will be giving you insights about how they are doing their job right now, what kind of workloads they deal with every day. And all of this will be live. So you can go ahead and ask questions on the fly, just like you ask in a classroom, with the comfort of your home. Right, and we conduct these classes on the weekends so that it doesn't basically, overlap with whatever your office schedule is. So if you're interested, you can actually go ahead and have a look at our course, right? So what this course is, this is a master's course that you see, which basically will not only teach you, only as your administrator, it will also teach you about as your architect. It will also teach you about Azure DevOps. So DevOps is basically a thing which is required by any cloud engineer which is being hired these days if they want to aim for a good package, right? So Azure DevOps is something that we're going to teach you, and we are also going to teach you about an ETL lifecycle, how to create it in Azure using the Azure Data Factory tool. Okay, so this is the Azure Masters that we are giving, guys. And if you want, you can actually get a flat 30% off on this course just by typing in the promo code YouTube30. So that is all that you have to do. Just go to our page, enter this promo code, and you get a flat 30% off. And this is exclusively for people who are watching this video, right? If you watch this video, get the promo code from here, go over there, and this will help you out. So with that said, guys, I thank you all for joining in today. I hope you have a clarity now, a better clarity on what cloud platforms are, and I'm pretty sure that you guys will go ahead today and practice this hands-on as well on your own, because I'm positive that it will help you in understanding it more. Don't think that if you have watched this session, you have understood what exactly did I do on the dashboard. When you do it yourself, you will understand 5 or 6 more things that probably you did not get while you were watching this video. So with that said, guys, I thank you all for joining in today. And if you want, you can actually contact us on the numbers displayed on the screen, right? And you can also email us at sales@intellipaat.com. Okay, so thank you guys for joining in today. Have a great day ahead, and goodbye.